Welcome to episode 5 of Iconic Seasons 1987, the year that saw one of the most iconic matchups in NCAA basketball history. On today's episode, we're going to be recapping the Final Four game between Providence and Syracuse. This was a clash of two upstarts and two all-time coaches, the Orangemen versus the Friars, Pitino versus Bayhime. The game propels the Orange to the national championship, even as the clock strikes midnight on the Friars' Cinderella run. If you're a fan of basketball, you don't want to miss this episode. Tune in, and if you like it, leave us a rating and or review. This is episode 5 of Iconic Seasons 1987.
All right, we're talking Syracuse-Providence today. I'm excited about this because I think both these teams really came into this game with a lot of gusto, and Providence was absolutely out of their minds shooting the basketball. And they're coming into this giant dome, and they kind of set the scene up as not a great shooting place. And what happens?
Yeah, I mean, they definitely did not shoot very well.
No.
That is for sure, but
They are only 2 of 11 here in the early minutes of this national semifinal. Donovan, still cold.
Time without committing a foul. Players are kind of exhausted here, but a little mental fatigue early.
I think the other part of this was the former assistant coach going against
For
his
sure.
head coach. Going into this, Pitino was 0-4 against Bayhime. And so during the season, they already had lost twice to them.
I thought it was 3. I think it was 3 times because they lost twice the regular season,
No, this
once
was
in
the
the
third
Big
time.
East. This is the third time.
Third
Okay.
time, yeah.
That's
And
tough
they
to
were
beat
saying,
one
like,
team.
you can't, third time's really hard to beat a team 3 times in 1 year.
Right.
And they really thought that after the second game wasn't as close as the first one, but their backup point guard was out, and he was back, and they thought with him
Oh, yeah,
that
that's right.
maybe he would take them over the hump and give them a
And
chance
he
to
had
win.
and he had a bunch of like scoring aptitude in the game before. He really like turned it on, and he's kind of a little different. He's about the same size as Donovan, but like that real burst of athleticism. So not as much of a shooter, but could really get to the basket. Like he could move, and he made some moves in this game that kind of showed you what they were talking about, but never ended up having impact. That
as a highlight for Providence in this game, he probably was their highlight.
I think
right?
so.
I mean, he had 18 points.
yeah, that's what I mean.
But Donovan just didn't. Like, he came in on fire, and I think they said he was averaging about 26 points in a tournament.
Yeah.
And he had 8. I just couldn't believe that he didn't get more shots, right? Like, why wasn't he running around screens? They said it during the game. I didn't understand that, but
So I think, this gets into a theme that we're definitely seeing in here, and that is so tough in a one-and-done tournament that it is hard to deviate from what you've done all year and adjust in the middle of a game. Again, even what you think is like, oh, at halftime, he's not hitting, so get him coming off some screens.
There's the screen by Duda.
Donovan's 3 on the money. His first 3 of the game.
There's the solid screen. Gets Donovan open.
I'm sure in the locker room, what you're really thinking is, or what you're talking about is like, you missed him in the first half. You're going to hit him in the second half. His game is like in transition, off turnovers, live ball situations. So that switching that up, putting someone else on the ball and having him run off screens, like, would he have been better like that? I don't, you know what I mean? Like, I would be more apt as the coach to think that he just had a bad first half and he'll get it going in the second half rather than changing up our whole game plan and hoping that works. Because, telling guys, hey, you're going to set good screens for Billy and having a guy that he's confident is going to deliver the pass, and that he's going to, I'm sure he could do that, but it's just like, boy, that's tough in the Final Four to make an adjustment like that.
Yeah, it's a different role. And I think that talking about some of the coaching things that made a difference, I thought, in the game, they started playing man. Syracuse did.
I know.
And I think that really threw them off because they planned for zone,
Yeah.
right? So they probably had planned plays for Donovan to get open against the zone, right? They probably thought, well, he's going to get open shots. And then all of a sudden they switched to man, and their game plan going into it probably completely changed because they didn't know what to do because Syracuse is a zone team. So, like, that's what they planned for.
One of the things that has made Syracuse so much more effective this year in the past is they can go play somebody man-to-man. They used to rely on their primary defense strictly as a zone.
Kipfer.
Good dish inside. Syracuse starts man-to-man. Here comes the press.
And it knocked the ball back out of bounds.
Jimmy, talking about man-to-man, your key, of course, playing against Providence has been man-to-man.
But this Syracuse club we're seeing really does play good, solid man-to-man defense, doesn't it?
Well, Howard Trish triggers it, and Sherman Douglas. They trigger it, and then we have the 2 shot blockers in the back. But we played good man-to-man all year. This year and last year, we led the league in field goal percentage defense. But I think it's overlooked a little bit in looking at us as an offensive team or a zone team. We played Providence both times man-to-man, and yet they were writing about how they're going to play against our zone in the paper. So we had no intentions of playing them a minute of zone.
Weird seeing Syracuse play man-to-man, isn't it?
It was weird.
And Providence sticking with the zone, too. I felt like, if anything hurt them in their zone, and I get why when you press like Providence does, that you want to drop back into a zone because you're kind of all over the place from the press. But man, on the boards, it really seemed to hurt them. It felt to me like they got killed on the boards. And oddly, which may have been a bastion of things to come for Syracuse, they got a ton of rebounds off free throws. What in the world was happening there?
16 fouls on Providence at the 8:59 mark, and only 2 on Syracuse. Now, Syracuse normally not a good free throw shooting team. Coleman, though, has fielded a couple of misses, gets the roll, and he'll have a chance to complete the three-point play.
Brent, this young fella, I think, considered by most, along with J.R. Reed, as the 2 top freshmen in the country this year. There may be some that argue, but without question, he's got all-American caliber play in him. And that's the second time that he's been able to get an offensive rebound off that inside game.
It is mind-boggling, that's for sure. You would think when you're in the Final Four that the boxing out would, especially back then, boxing out was such a big thing. Now you can kind of see it because players really rely on their athletic ability to get rebounds compared to using boxing out like we used to. So yeah, that was mind-blowing, but maybe that goes back to the rims.
Yeah,
let's talk about the rims. There's an episode, there's a thing in the middle of the game where the announcer's like, yeah, the reason why these Syracuse is getting so many rebounds is because these rims are so hard, so they bounce off, and Syracuse is just faster to the ball. So do you buy in that the rims can make one team a better rebounding team later?
0% chance. Also, the shooting did not seem to affect UNLV and IU later because they could not miss a shot. Although maybe, Freddie didn't even hit the rim, so maybe it was just all swishes, and he didn't have to worry about the rim. I'm not sure. Alfred and him, they're all just swishes. So they're like, oh, yeah, we don't worry about the hard rims because we don't even touch them.
And then the other question that I would have about the rims is, why would the NCAA have hard rims?
I don't know.
Right? That doesn't even make sense. You spend all this money on seats, shirts, all this stuff. Why would you not be able to have good rims?
You order up a hard rim. You know what we need for the Final Four? Let's get some extra hard rims. Let's make sure we get that titanium. We got to reinforce these babies.
Yeah. Why wouldn't you just see better scoring? That doesn't even make sense.
Can we go to New York City and find a double rim and fly that in for the Final Four? Wild. We want the softest rims available. I'm not sure. Certainly seems like an interesting choice. And I don't know who... it's the announcer saying it, so it's funny. Where did they get that information from?
I know. So, if they knew going into the tournament that they were going to have hard rims, then why would they not fix it? So that that's just
it's funny.
Doesn't make any sense.
Funny
but
that
it was funny
up.
They used that as the
For
rebound.
sure.
Syracuse is dominating the boards because of the rims.
For sure.
And Mike Krzyzewski of Duke. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me. What did you think of the first half, Coach Crumb?
Well, I felt Syracuse was way too strong inside. I think their rebounding, they just dominated the play inside. And if you played in a dome before, you know that the outside shooting is usually a little bit difficult, and that's what Providence had lived by. And I didn't feel that they'd have a good shooting percentage here.
You attribute that to the depth perception?
Because everything's so far away behind the basket. Just different. Syracuse, of course, plays in the dome, so they're used to it.
Mike, who matches up better now for Syracuse between UNLV and Indiana? Which team do you think would favor a matchup for Syracuse?
Well, that's why I'm wearing the Indiana button. I want Indiana to be in there no matter what the matchup is. I think Syracuse will give trouble to both teams because of their inside strength, like Denny had said. I thought a key kid in that ball game, I don't know what you guys mentioned, but Trish had 3 big offensive rebounds in the game, and it seemed that, especially that three-point play, when it was going to look like Providence was going to come through, that was, I think, the big play of the game.
So what jumped out to you to start the game out?
Well, I don't know if it jumped out. They were extremely slow, both teams. They both seemed like they they were both extremely nervous.
Yeah.
And you could tell they were missing shots they shouldn't miss. And for a while there, I was like, when's the scoring coming?
Yeah.
You know, I think it was like about 6 minutes in, and it wasn't a very high scoring game. It was like 8-6 or something crazy. And then they started hitting some shots, and what jumped out to me is Syracuse had some size down there.
Yeah.
They were big boys.
Big.
Yeah.
Yeah. Coleman and Cycli. And I mean, Coleman is an unbelievable as a freshman. Like that guy looks, you can see why he would later become a high draft pick. And despite maybe not loving basketball enough to become great, he had all the physical tools to be an absolute.
He was definitely the prototypical extreme athlete that can take advantage of being just a Zion type. It's just
wingspan.
Crazy athletic.
Yep.
7-foot wingspan.
Great. His movements are very fluid. That's the difference between him and Cycli. Is Coleman's movement is just a fluid athlete. He's moving all over the court with no hesitation. Cycli was actually, of all the Syracuse guys, he was probably the one that was the most off in this game to start. He seemed uncomfortable and just awkward, and he got one dunk in the first half that was, kind of really threw it down. But besides that, he just didn't look too great against Providence, which I thought was pretty odd.
And the thing about that was I was looking for him to see what he would do the first half, because they had said that he had averaged I want to say 26 points in the tournament.
Yeah.
So coming in, he was their beast, right?
Yeah,
I was
he's
like,
their stud.
this guy's just going to dominate. And the first half,
not so much.
He really didn't do that.
I mean,
much.
it's a good thing. It kept Providence into it, because looking at the score and thinking about the game, I kind of remembered this as an afterthought. But it's a good game. It's back and forth. It's pretty close. Providence's press is causing turnovers. It's doing what it needs to do. They just could not get their shots falling, but they never really felt out of it. And then in the second half, they got into that weird zone where it's it seemed like they could never get over the hump. We'll talk about the fight. They go on a little run after the fight, but besides that, it didn't seem like they had enough juice to get over the hump.
Providence had a lot of good looks, and they were a good shooting team. They just
really
couldn't make
coming in
they couldn't hit anything.
50% from three coming into the game.
It was just nuts. That's why during the game they probably didn't change their game plan, because they've been doing it all season and they're getting the shots they want. They're just missing it, right? So if they just hit half their threes the first half, then maybe it's a totally different game. Syracuse really wasn't pressed to worry about losing. They really had control most of the game. It was closer in the first half, but I still felt like they had the control, right? You still thought they were going to win, so it would have been nice to see what would have happened. But that's what happens with 3-point shooting teams. Sometimes you're on, sometimes you're off. And they didn't have a big guy down there like Syracuse to keep him in the game.
Cycli and Coleman, just too much for Providence inside.
The lob to Coleman. Barking defensive calls. Douglas to Cycli. Trish underneath.
Set play for the lob that time to Ronnie Cycli.
Ronnie, how do you dominate this team so?
Well, Providence, you can never dominate Providence because they're such a pesky team inside. They don't give you anything. They frustrate you inside. If you do have a layup, they're gonna foul you and make you earn it on the foul line. And it's just I'm glad this game is over with, and hopefully we'll play against a man-to-man team, and that'll be much better.
So let's go ahead and transition.
You didn't like Duda
into what aged the best?
Well, I got
the lob dunks,
oh
man.
My
oh gosh, that was awesome.
although his announcing about the lob dunks did not age so well. That should be illegal. He was so mad about throwing it above the cylinder.
Oh,
you can't put it above the cylinder. I'm like, wait, why?
Well, I think what he's trying to say was
he's trying to say it's like a shot.
The cylinder that you
but
can't.
If it doesn't hit the rim, what are we talking about? It's just a nicely placed pass. It looked awesome.
Oh, that brought so much more. This game was not exciting because of defense, right?
He gets called for an offensive foul on the first one, doesn't he, Coleman?
I think it was the first one, but he did get called for one.
Yeah, he runs baseline. They throw this lob to him. He goes up and gets it. He gets called for the foul somehow. A guy's underneath him. I'm like, how is that on?
There was 3 calls during this game that the announcers were like, that was a good call. And then wait a minute. It's going the other way.
I know. They were totally what?
Coleman lets it roll out.
Yes.
Doesn't grab it for some reason. He didn't realize that it was tipped. And then, like, he goes for it, and then I was just like, well, Coleman got lucky there. And then 20 seconds later, well, that was a foul on Coleman. They're shooting 3 throws. And you're like, what just happened?
Again, we'll talk more about it, but I have to say, they had an all-out bench-clearing brawl. No, not one technical. No, zero people thrown out. 0 technicals. Wow. The officiating didn't define this game outside of that incident, but it wasn't great either.
Does it change the game? We'll just go ahead and go to the fight.
Okay.
Right. So does it change the game that they didn't?
Well, let's set up the fight too, because this is, so if you got to go watch this, because this is an incredible piece of like NCAA lore. The fact that no one gets thrown out. So these two guys, it starts out pretty innocently, right? It's basically the hook and hold that they now call flagrant for automatically. But one guy's got the other guy hooked and gets a little pissy, pushes him off. And then Coleman comes in from behind with an absolute haymaker. He comes 100%. In to try to murder someone with a single punch from behind the guy and grazes him basically. And so then he turns around, obviously pissed, looking for someone to punch. And then a Providence guy comes in, jacking Coleman
to the ground.
And then they wrestle each other to the ground. I mean, and meanwhile, punches are being thrown, pushing, total chaos here. Yeah. Ronnie Cycli, the 7-footers in the middle, and the announcers you mentioned, so you can repeat it.
Yeah,
What's he do?
Like, he goes, oh, Ronnie didn't get involved at all. He really was mature or something like that. And then right when he said it, Ronnie sticks his knee right into somebody that's laying on the ground.
The
puts all its pressure.
The Providence player, by the way.
And then like the announcer goes away from it. Yeah. Doesn't say another word about it because I think he realized that he was wrong.
Ronnie did nothing except.
And they didn't show it again.
Except knee drop a guy's midsection, a 7-foot, 300-pound guy. Wild. So they clear it all up. And you're like, oh, man. I mean, Coleman's gone for sure.
100%.
You know, no doubt about it. Anybody who threw punches should be gone. Probably the first 2 guys that initiated it at least get technicals for kind of starting the fracas. So they go away, get everybody to their sidelines. Nothing.
There's Douglas trying to go for that lob against, and that time, we got a real stick up here.
Delray, Brooks, and Douglas going at it.
I mean, we're seeing some fists thrown there. And
now, Delray and Douglas are not down on the ground.
I'll tell you, that one exploded. Normally, Brent, when a fist is thrown like that, somebody goes, but it happens so quickly, I don't think the referees are going to throw somebody out.
Place in the game here between Syracuse and Providence. This was one brief altercation. No technicals were called. There you see a punch flying and landing in there.
Well, I tell you, those kind of things can happen because, it's a tension-packed game and it means so much, but it's a shame that they do, but that's just the nature of athletics. I was surprised there were no technicals called or no one removed from the game, but I guess they felt Final Four, let's just call it even, and it wasn't, something that just happened, I guess.
Sherman, let me ask you first of all about how the fight broke out between you and Delray Brooks.
Well, against us in Providence, it's always going to be a tough game, and it was a Big East game, and we just got tied up, and we just pushed and shoved each other. It wasn't really nothing serious. It was just a pushing match, that's all.
Ronnie, you were acting as a peacemaker. Were you able to see how the fight got triggered?
No, not really. As soon as I turned my head, something happened. All I see was people swinging at each other. I have no idea what happened.
Jimmy, how did you see it from the bench?
I couldn't see it. I just saw it start, and then I just wanted to get the one in front of me broken up, so I just tried to keep those 2 separated. Providence is physical, and it's a physical game. It's just one of those things that breaks out sometimes in the Big East.
Well, what got me is
we come back.
This was like 20 seconds,
no
right?
Technicals.
Like, this wasn't like a 3-second fight.
No.
And that's what they made it sound like.
Yeah.
They're like, well, it's really hard for them to figure out what happened.
Yeah.
I'm like, what are you talking about? They're rolling on the ground.
This is not 1955. We're literally watching the replays, guys. Like you could call up to the booth and be like, oh, yeah, Derek Coleman tried to murder someone. He should probably not be in this game anymore. And that, in and of itself, would have changed the game for sure.
Because
he was at least physically the most dominating player there.
And Ronnie would have had to get a technical, right?
For sure, for knee dropping.
And he got 3 fouls after this. So, that would have put him on the bench, and Coleman would have been out. That totally changes the whole game. Totally.
Well, it was Douglas, too, that was the initiator. So he gets at least a technical there. So just changes
And he gets a technical later.
Yeah, so it just changes the dynamic of the game. And the fact that they just came together and were like, I think we're good.
You see Pitino like, what? What do you mean you think you're good?
I guess everybody got a punch in, so we're going to call it even Steven.
So,
it's like, well, somebody has to have asked the refs at some point. I didn't find anything, but if anybody's got anything, I'd really love to know what their rationale was to just go. But this is when people get mad about today's game being soft. It's like, maybe, you know, like,
it is soft compared to that.
And maybe in a good way, because that was wild stuff to watch.
Well, what's crazy about the fight is that happens, and then Providence goes on this run. It isn't a big run, but they're coming back. Then there's a steal. They go down for a layup. The guy passes it and gets fouled. And the guy goes up and scores it. Oh. And they count the bucket.
Yep.
Even though the foul's way before he gets the ball.
Clearly.
So like that was like all momentum was on Providence.
Yeah.
That play happens, and really all it should have been was a foul, right?
Yeah.
Like it shouldn't even have been
side out.
Yep.
Yep.
And they get the bucket, and then they get to shoot a free throw. And I think they even get the rebound because they missed it.
They did.
You got to get 2 shots, not 1 free throw, 2 shots.
Yeah, and
like,
the bucket.
All momentum changes. Yeah. So what? I mean, like, Pitino's over there, and he's going, "What is going on right now?"
That was my coaching moment. There was just like his exasperation. The cut to him when that
like
call comes through,
hands.
and it is like classic Pitino. Like he has lost his mind at that point. He's like, "My God, what is happening in this game?" He is absolutely cannot believe what just happened. I want to rewind though real quick. So this goes with kind of the mental thing of this. You mentioned a little while ago about the cold start, and the announcers kept harping on like that the guys get tight. How much do you buy into that? Because it's often the narrative in a big game that the announcers will bring up, oh, these guys are tight. Oh, it's the moment is really getting to them. They just can't get loose. But I think it's always such an easy thing to reach for. And I mean, it of course fits then, but everyone on the team, you know what I mean? It becomes too broad for me because I can't imagine like these guys who have played in, you know, especially back then, a bunch of seniors, been in a bunch of big games. Everyone on Providence and Syracuse is tight. Like,
maybe
come on,
it isn't,
right?
Maybe it's the wording. Maybe it isn't tight. Maybe it's just they're so jacked up.
Or even that.
You know, like maybe they miss shots because they're so jacked up.
But everybody on both teams, it always seems like a convenient thing to go to. But I guess like that's one of those things that kind of annoys me. I'd rather them be a little bit more specific and use something that maybe they've seen. Like I was watching him warm up and he just looked out of rhythm. Or I would hear like after the fact, like sometimes in games this year where, you know, the announcer is watching who's seen all the games and they're like, something just didn't look right with him tonight. And I've seen him warm up before and he wasn't going through his normal routine. That's something that's interesting. You know, I've heard it now so many times, and to see it go back, you know, going back so far, and to still hear that same thing, like, oh, that's a big game, they're tight.
I mean, but some teams do come out and they say that everybody plays hard. Yeah. But like sometimes they play extra hard on defense at the very beginning, like they're so jacked up.
Nuts.
Maybe that is the real reason. Like they're playing out of their mind defensively because they're so jacked up, ready to play, and maybe that affected the other team. I don't know. There's so many different ways.
It was definitely off to start the game. I mean, I think it can. You said rightly. I think part of it's due to Syracuse going to the man-to-man, and then Providence's press is really good and kind of relentless. So that is hard to get used to. I don't care how many times you play against a press. The first minute facing it is always such a pain because it's all about patience, execution. You got to go slow when they're going fast. And then the opposite, if you break it, you got to go fast and try to really get it. So it is like a rhythm thing.
And I mean, how many of those passes almost got stolen?
A bunch.
And then I was watching that game and I was like, he's not going to pass it there. And like the guy's jumping over the other guy and grabbing it. And I'm like, wow. You think that they would have had more open? It was just like crazy, the inches that they could have been. Providence was really good at that press.
They're good. They really
For sure.
were. Yeah. What about, you had something about Delray Brooks. What do you want to bring up about him?
Yeah, I think that I wanted to bring it up because Bob Knight sometimes gets a really bad rap for his anger issues and the way he treats his players. But they had a quote, or they had talked to Bob Knight about Brooks because he transferred from IU and he went to Providence. And Bob Knight said he's a great player. He just didn't fit in well for what we're trying to do here. And I wish him the best of luck. And he knows that I don't have anything against him. He's a great kid. He only said positive things about him. And I think that sometimes that gets lost. Bob Knight did a lot of great things for the players, that doesn't get talked about.
Yeah, he didn't seem to hold it against him in any way, which is great. And I think it's a little easier maybe when it works out for both people.
Well, yeah, but that was before the game.
It was.
And they might have had a chance to play him in the next game, the national championship
game. But
game.
I'm saying you're in the Final Four, so it's a little nice. It's a little easier to be.
He was in a good mood.
Yeah, exactly. It's a little easier to be giving in those situations. It's like, yeah, we both made it to the Final Four. Good for him. If IU had lost in the first round again and Brooks was in the Final Four and Knight was fishing, I'm not sure if you would have got the same response.
Probably not. If he really needed him,
he shot us in the back. No, that's great. That's great to coach. It takes a big person to do that because he's good for them, and he doesn't have a great game here, but definitely you can see the looks there that were great.
So I do have a question for you. Do you think that Bayhime coaching and subbing more players in made a bigger difference in this game? Because he was trying to match the energy of Providence and play more players.
They had their 5-man.
They normally didn't put that many guys in, and that just shows he was willing to go outside of his comfort zone and play more guys, try to match the energy of Providence because of that zone.
It seems like it seems like it. Bayhime was completely engaged in this game. He gets into it with Cycli at one point. Like he really coaching his guys. He's going for it in this game. Like it's very clear. Like he's in command and he's at the peak of his powers here. Bayhime is a good coach in this game.
Oh yeah,
he manages the game well. He's got a good game plan, again, going with that man-to-man defense. Clearly knows that Sherman Douglas makes Billy Donovan uncomfortable, and he is just in Donovan's jock the entire game. That guy, it's like the Hoosiers thing. I want to know what flavor gum, he's chewing. He definitely knew for Donovan.
So you think that he outcoached Pitino, or do you think that Syracuse just had more talent?
Think about in football, Paul Brown, a great master of the Cleveland Browns, all those coaches that he turned out, they couldn't beat him in football. And now today, Bayhime apparently going to run his streak to 5-0 against Rick Pitino, who was his assistant coach for 2 years.
I think he outcoaches it. I mean, I think it's pretty clear that he's a better coach than Pitino at this juncture. Yeah, I mean, he's beat him 4 times in a row, 5 times in a row. He's kind of got your number. He knows your tricks, and I think there is a talent deficit here, though, too, to be fair to Pitino. I do think that Syracuse is more talented than Providence, but as we hit on, there weren't really adjustments that Providence was willing or chose to make. And so it was kind of baked in. Once the second half hit and they still weren't hitting shots, that's when it felt like, oh, this is maybe not going to happen. This is not going to happen. And they had that run, like you said, the fight really sort of changed. Even though that nobody got thrown out, it did change. It messed up Syracuse for a minute. But that one foul then just kind of righted the ship, and that was kind of it.
Now, I know that you really liked Sherman in this game, and you haven't talked about him. So what'd you think about him?
Hey, what's it like talking to Sherman Douglas when he gets thick-headed out there on you, says he's going to go all the way? You told me something coming over here that he did for the first time in his career.
First time ever that he takes it up inside no matter who's there, if there's 3 7-footers. But tonight, first time ever, he said, maybe I'll take it out next time.
He gave you a maybe.
I'm not sure he will, though.
How about it?
Sherman, what about the second game? Who do you think's going to win, Indiana or UNLV?
Well, both ball clubs has a great team and a great coach, and we really don't care who wins. I think UNLV might have the edge because of their court speed. We just glad to be here.
He plays the perfect game for me. If I could transport myself into someone else's body and play the game, this is the game that I want to play. He plays absolutely unbelievable defense. He is an unbelievable passer throughout the game, throwing those, again, modern lob passes to the threats, to the guys cutting or on the fast break. He's scoring himself. He dominates the game in so many ways. Like, his imprint on this game is undeniable.
Yeah, I thought he was really good too. I knew you really liked him. That's why.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, so we always do our would this game be better with Walton?
And we're at Stanford today, and we've got the game of the millennium tonight.
It doesn't get any better than this.
I do. Learn to love your job, love pressure. Let's go.
I think can succeed here. Barack Obama. I don't think he's going to coach. So
well, you keep saying that, but why? Why are you so negative? Why do you just turn down? Party on. It's a wonderful day. It's Oregon. The sun was out. Come on.
I personally believe that it would have been. I would have loved to heard Walton talk about the fight.
Oh,
like that would have been instant classic. He would have not have been like, oh, they just didn't see it.
Would he have been out there trying to break it up?
He maybe. You don't know. Like,
guys,
oh my
peace.
gosh, can you believe this? This is WWF out here. And I would have loved to hear him with the foul that we talked about earlier.
Gosh.
That would have been unbelievable. And the lobs. I think he would have been like, did you see me about tore the rim down on that one?
He definitely, too, wouldn't have been complaining about the passes. That was probably the most disappointed I was in one of the announcers was complaining about it was a beautiful play. If you think that it's not legal, just call the rules committee about that. I'm watching the game for the excitement of it, not for your opinion on it. They get into that in the NBA sometimes too, still, where Van Gundy or someone will throw out there, I don't like charges, and it's just like, all right, I've heard that a few times now, buddy. And it's just, I'd rather have the announcers talking about what's cool, like you said, like the Walton part of it.
I think they were just more professional back then. I mean, not in a bad way. It was cut like they were going to learn about everybody. They were going to talk about it like it wasn't. They were there just to give information.
I agree.
And not to give excitement and add to the game.
But then they shouldn't have taken away from the game.
Oh, no, exactly.
By calling out.
And that was new, though,
illegal.
right? The lobs, it wasn't really that frequent back then.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that the lobs had been around. I think that just the execution of it was obviously something that he wasn't accustomed to, because it seemed his placement of it was so exact that seemed to throw him off. But I mean, a pass is a pass. Either you're shooting it or you're passing it. It's clear that he's not in a shooting motion. So I don't know how that would be illegal in any way. If it was a shot that the guy grabbed or it hit the rim, it hit the rim and it was, I could see it then. I just didn't like how he framed it up.
How do you think this game transitioned in for the national title?
Oh, that's what
I think that for me, I would have been extremely pumped because Syracuse is going into this national championship game. And I'll be honest, I would think that Syracuse would have the advantage with Coleman and Ronnie down there and Douglas. But Indiana does take down UNLV, which it was a giant for them to take down too. So it's kind of like you got a hot team versus kind of,
I think the coaching thing flips too. I think there's a confidence to Bayhime in this. He's beat up Patino all those times, and now it's Knight coming in here.
Oh yeah,
he's got 2 national champions. He's got Alford leading the way. He's got seniors underneath too in Garrett. I think that the moxie that they come in with is a little bit different. But again, it ends up in a coin flip. So they still do. They come in and this Syracuse team is absolutely legit. And we haven't even talked about a bunch of the guys. Monroe was awesome, and they have a bunch of guys contributing. So this is an absolutely dynamic Syracuse team, and had every right to win a national championship. If it comes down to one shot, they definitely could have beat IU. And if it hadn't been for Alford absolutely bombing away from 3,
we can't talk about that. We don't know about it yet.
We're getting there. We're getting there. Yeah, we're getting there.
Let's snap back for a moment to last year's tournament. Do you remember the 2 most embarrassing defeats? Sure. Number 1 was up in the Carrier Dome. Jim Bayhime, the Syracuse team, they were roundly criticized for losing to the Naval Academy. Then there was that stunning upset of Indiana by Cleveland State. Cleveland State turning out to be a little bit better team than you might have imagined. Who would have guessed or bet at the time that both Indiana and Syracuse will rise from those ashes and make it to the Final Four?
Thank you for joining us for this look back at the Syracuse versus Providence Final Four game. Iconic Seasons is a Principal podcast production. I'm your host and executive producer, Aaron Meyer. Special thanks to all our guests for sharing their journeys and insights. If you enjoy this series, head over to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts and follow the show. Make sure you leave us a rating and review. It really helps us and helps others discover the show. If you're interested in a bonus episode, send us your questions via email. Our email address is hardwoodhistory@gmail.com. Thanks again for listening. We'll be back with episode 6, UNLV Storytelling.